How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm an avid herpetologist, and today we are talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! So recently we got a very exciting announcement from Konami. They have now created a brand new format for players to enjoy called Genesys. Now, in case you somehow haven't already heard, basically Genesys is a no ban list Yu-Gi-Oh! Format, where instead of having cards that are officially banned in the format, instead what you have is a point system. Basically, there is a list of cards that are going to be worth different point values. You can include any cards in the entire history of the game that you want, as long as you are not exceeding a point value total of 100. So basically, you can use 0 points, you can use the full 100, any number in between, but you cannot exceed 100 points with all of the cards that you have included in your deck. Now, this is a really exciting format. I've gotten a little bit of mixed responses online, but by and large, the reception seems to be pretty positive. This is a format that is going to help players who are kind of tired of modern power creep rein things in just a little bit without having to really dedicate or reset to an older format, because obviously Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a lot of very popular formats in their Time Wizard settings like GOAT format and Edison. If you don't want to reset all the way back to those time periods, now you have a modern format that you can play. Not only that, but this is a format where you can actually play some cards that are very likely never going to come off the ban list. One of the big selling points of this format for a lot of people is the fact that Pot of Greed is playable at 3 copies. Since this card is worth only 30 points, you can include a full 3 copies in your deck and you would still have 10 points left over. That's pretty exciting. Now, even though there is not technically a ban list for this format, there is some cards that are essentially fully banned. One great example is the card Abyss Dweller. This is a very powerful card. It's very easy to make with 2 rank 4s. However, it is worth a full 100 points. Now, the reason I say that this card is basically soft banned is it's not really a card that you're going to want to build an entire strategy around. It's a very powerful floodgate, but it's not like a win condition. So if you're in a situation where your deck is not spending any points and can afford to use Abyss Dweller, more than likely you're not going to use all of your points on Abyss Dweller when, like I said, you can use those 100 points on 3 copies of Pot of Greed instead and still keep 10 points left over. So there are certain cards that are very essentially banned out of the format, and honestly, I think that's kind of a good thing. I think it's honestly a net positive that certain cards are just not going to be playable, and ultimately we're in a really exciting time right now with this new format. Basically, because this is so brand new, because all these cards are legal and we've never seen a Yu-Gi-Oh! Format like this before, it's currently like a mad scramble to kind of find decks that work under these new rules and guidelines. So there's currently no meta. People are going to be basically playing whatever they like. Because a lot of the current highest power decks have been completely neutered by the point system, so most players are going to be looking either for decks that they really enjoy or staking bets on what they think is going to be competitively viable in this format. Now, today we're going to be covering my personal favorite pet deck, which absolutely does meet those criteria. I think this is a very strong deck in the format that fits cleanly into the point system, and that is my darling Paleozoics. So we're going to be quickly going through my deck profile. I might show you guys a couple of very quick games at the end just to kind of show you how some of the combos work. I think this deck is really solid for a lot of different reasons. Thankfully, the Genesys format fixes a lot of the issues that Paleozoics have in the modern meta. So let's go ahead and get into it, guys. Let me show you what I'm working with. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get into it. So there's a couple of things to talk about with our list here. First and foremost, seems like it would make the most sense to talk about our point distributions. Now, you'll have to bear with me. I'm still doing my best at trying to figure out how to effectively do Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profiles. These cards are way wordier than Digimon, but I'm trying to present these cards in a way that is coherent while not being too wordy. So I'm going to do my best. Please bear with me. I'm trying to find a style that still works for me. So starting us off with our point values is actually a brand new card. This card and the other card next to it are cards that actually originally weren't worth any points on the current point system. Konami has already made an update to their points list, and both of these cards went from 0 to 7 points apiece. Now, thankfully, this deck is so low on point commitment that, frankly, those cards didn't really change anything when they did go to 21 points apiece for playsets. The only card that really dropped from my list that I already play in regular modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the single copy of Reasoning, which is a 40-point card now. Without that, everything else is pretty much the exact same. So currently we have a total of 21 points distributed to 3 copies of Trapaholic. This is a brand new card that just came out. It opens up a lot of really strong interactions for trap-centric archetypes. Makes a lot of sense for why this card is now worth 7 points. Although I will say, just as an honorable mention, I am honestly shocked that Trapaholic is worth 7 points, but they haven't yet given any point value to Trap Trick. I think Trap Trick is probably on borrowed time. I'm not really sure why they would make Trapaholic worth 7 and not Trap Trick. So just for the record, this deck may be subject to change in the future if they do ultimately update the list and make Trap Trick worth more points, but for the time being, it is not, but we do have 21 points dedicated to Trapaholic. It's a great startup card for the archetype that also helps us deal with our copies of Transaction Rollback that we get stuck with in our hand. We can now target those on the field and get rid of them to play something else far more valuable out. Of course, we have to play our 3 copies of Transaction Rollback, which opens up way more interaction for the archetype. This card is absolutely incredible. No surprise whatsoever, this card is worth 7 points. If anything, I'm surprised it's not worth more. We are also playing a full 3 copies of Destructive Daruma Karma Cannon. This card being worth 5 points feels like a steal, if I'm being completely honest. I think this is one of the strongest traps in the game. It sets all monsters on the board into face-down defense position. Now, in Genesys format, there are no link monsters, so there is a certain sense where this card is maybe not going to shut off quite as many plays as it normally would. In a format that is wrought with link monsters, setting a monster to the field basically invalidates it if they're only going to be trying to link summon. Now, granted, this is going to shut off Synchro NXE's plays just fine and is still a great out to potential towers that are immune to all the different abilities, since it forces your opponent to send monsters that are still face up. But if your opponent is on a fusion strategy, and obviously we're going to have to wait and kind of see how many fusion strategies are actually viable in Genesys format, but those can get around this card just fine, which is probably why it's not worth more. But I still think this card is absolutely insane as a just blanket removal card to just shut your opponent's turn down. And setting your Paleozoics also resets their effect that would cause them to be banished if they leave the field. So this card is really, really strong for Paleozoics specifically. The rest of our points are going to be in our extra deck. We are dedicating 20 points to Totally Awesome. Now, something that is worth mentioning is one of the most common ways of playing Paleozoics competitively, historically, is frogs. However, not only is Totally Awesome worth 20 points, but other vitally important frog cards, including things like Swap Frog, is going to be worth 33 points. That's a really big one. And then, of course, Ronin Totem is also worth 60. So the actual frog engine is actually pretty heavily hit by the ban list, which makes my favorite way of playing Paleozoics, the pure trap variant, far more viable over frogs, because you're not really going to be able to afford all of these points dedicated to your monsters when you have such vitally important trap cards that you need to use those points on. So I am going to be spending 20 points on a single copy of Totally Awesome. I don't really need or frankly want more than that, if I'm being completely honest. One is just fine. In my version of the deck and the way that I pilot Paleozoics, this is one of the last cards that I make when I'm trying to close the game out. It's not usually the first card that I want to create because it's not going to help create more card advantage for me. So I am playing a single copy of this, but like I said, the way that I play the deck, don't make this first. I usually err on the side of making Opabinia first, and we'll talk a little bit about how good Opabinia is now, thanks to the addition of another new card. But we also have 10 points that are donated to our Superstar Slayer Typhon. This card is perfectly fine to remove from the deck, honestly. I have actually given some thought to potentially taking out the Superstar Slayer and the Natis, which is honestly just in here for filler, because I don't use a lot of the extra deck. But I could take these 2 cards out and then use a copy of Utopic Future and Draco Future in place of the Star Slayer. I think there are certain scenarios where that could be worthwhile. It's pretty easy to make Utopic Future in a Paleo deck because you're spamming so many rank 2s, but generally speaking, I think Star Slayer still has good usage, and in a vacuum is probably the better card because it's way easier to make. So I am going to go ahead and dedicate 10 points to my copy of Sky Crisis. This is just in here because I don't need the full 15 card extra deck. I tend to make a lot of the same monsters like my Paleozoics, Toads. So ultimately, the Natis is just kind of here for filler. Since I had extra points, why not just put something in here just in case the opponent is playing something Dogmatica-esque, right? Rather than just have it be here for something I'm probably not going to make anyway. But that's about it for the points. Only 94 points spent, so definitely still have some wiggle room there. But we'll go ahead and go through the rest of the deck. I am going to be playing 2 copies of Magicoloidal Slime. This card is just probably the best level 2 monster you can use to kind of supplement the Paleozoic archetype. Being an Aqua type means it can make Totally Awesome. It also is a tuner, which gives us the chance to make our Armory Arm. Now, Magicoloidal Slime also has another really important use that I'm going to talk about in a little bit that enables pathetically easy OTKs, and we'll talk about that when we get to the extra deck cards. So we have 2 copies of Magical Little Slime. It's the only 2 monsters in the deck. The rest of it is going to be 38 traps. I'm playing 2 copies of Ice Dragon's Prison. Fantastic interaction. It's just good for a lot of different matchups. We have 3 copies of Needlebug Nest. Definitely going to be obviously the best starter in the game. Now, since we've hit Needlebug Nest, it's actually a good time to talk about why I think Paleozoics are so well positioned in this new format. One of the things about the Paleozoic deck and the way that it matches up into a lot of the modern archetypes, things like Ash Blossom can basically shut this deck down on turn 1. Now, Ash Blossom doesn't do anything against Opabinia, but if they have the Ash Blossom for our turn 1 Needlebug Nest, that can be a big kneecap to the way that Paleos play. Thankfully, in Genesys format, not only is Ash Blossom worth 15 points apiece, but a lot of the other really big Paleo counters are also worth a decent amount of points. We've got, of course, Ash Blossom. All of the mass back row removal like Feather Duster, Heavy Storm, and Lightning Storm are all worth a ton of points. Dimension Shifter is only worth 10, but also, I feel like not too many decks are going to be playing Dimension Shifter, but that, of course, could obviously change. To be fair, Dimension Shifter is an incredibly powerful floodgate. The fact that it is only worth 10, there is the likelihood that some decks are going to opt to be playing 3 copies. For instance, if Fluanderies is able to find its way into viability, that's a possibility, but other cards like Denko Sekka, which is one of the really common sideboard options for Paleos, that is going to be worth 20 points. Getting less likely people are going to want to donate those to cards like that. But in general, a lot of these cards that tend to hurt Paleo decks the most, a lot of them are pretty high on the points list, and that is going to discourage their use over other much more either synergistic or frankly exciting options. Now, there are a few cards like Twin Twisters and DD Crow that are not on the points list, and you should absolutely watch out for these because obviously these are going to be a bit of a pain for the Paleo strategy. But as long as you know they exist and you do your best to play around them, hopefully they're not going to be too much of a damper for you. Anyways, back to the deck. So our Paleozoic cards, obviously we're going to be playing our 3 Canadia, our Book of Moon Effect, still excellent, 3 Dynamiscus, great card. I'm playing a single copy of Leancholia, which can return one of our transaction rollbacks to the graveyard, or anything that we choose to banish, whether we use Trap Trick and banish a Paleo, then Leancholia can then return that to the graveyard for later use. In general, it's a pretty flexible card, but it does require some setup, so I'm just playing the 1 copy. 3 Morella. Another really fantastic startup card. Can send any of our traps to the graveyard. If we already have transaction rollback, we can send any of our tech choices to help protect us for a turn or interact if we need to. We're playing our 3 copies of Olenoids for back row removal and 3 copies of Pikaia. I personally love Pikaia. I know a lot of other Paleo lists don't play it, but it's a trade-in for Paleozoic traps, and it's a really good way to, again, fill your graveyard while keeping your tempo going. So I think this card is fantastic, and I'm going to be playing 3 copies, as I always have. I've never been upset to see it. We do have 2 copies of Terrors of the Overroot, in my opinion, the most underrated common in the entire game, that interacts with any card you want on the field, and serves as a form of graveyard removal at the same time. So you get 2 for 1, and it is a very powerful card. 3 copies of Threatening Roar, since all of the Paleozoics are immune to monster effects. If you can protect them from battle as well, pretty hard to get over them, so 3 copies of Threatening Roar. And of course, our 3 copies of Trap Trick to round out our 40 card list here. Now, the fact that we have 3 copies of Trap Trick and 3 copies of Trapaholic, both of these cards represent 2 trap activations each, and both of these are great targets to hit with transaction rollback to extend even further. So basically, this is just more ways that we can now spam the board with even more Paleozoics all in the same turn. So really, really solid. Basically, Paleos, in this list anyways, are playing at full modern power, while a lot of other archetypes are going to get kneecapped by that point system. So I think this deck is still in a really good position to be a solid rogue deck if it's a deck you're willing to get good with. The fact that they do have a lot of monster immunity gives them a lot of very helpful protection against a lot of the decks that are going to be existent in the Genesys format. So that's going to do it for my main deck. Let's go ahead and cover things in our extra deck. Not too much to talk about for most of it, but there is a card I need to spend some time on. So we have 1 copy of Centaria, just kind of because. This is easily a card I could cut and not lose any sleep over, but it is at least a somewhat unique form of interaction, being able to bounce things back to the hand, so I'm playing it for that reason. I'm going to be playing 3 copies of both of my Paleozoic Xyz monsters. These are my primary game plan when I'm piloting Paleos. Ideally, I want to try to make Opabinia on turn 2 every single game, so it can fetch something that will keep my tempo going and hopefully keep my opponent's board in check. Now, the other Paleozoic Xyz, I feel like gets a little bit less love in a lot of Paleo lists, but this is actually one of the reasons that I personally prefer to play Paleos the way that I do. If you've never seen Anomalocaris before, it has an effect on both turns once per turn, where if a trap card is sent from your spell and trap zone to the graveyard, you excavate your top card, and it goes to your hand if it's a trap. So basically, on both turns, the first card that you're using is going to ideally be replacing itself, since 38 of our 40 cards are traps that are going to get added to our hand. Anomalocaris is also great interaction, where it can pop any card on the field by detaching a material. So in general, it's just like a really scary and, in my opinion, super underrated boss monster, even by a lot of Paleo players. But the big card that we have to talk about, and another card I actually think is a contender to eventually wind up on the points list if it catches on, is this card, Dragon Gate. So Dragon Gate is a brand spanking new card to the TCG. As far as I know, it is currently TCG only. We got to talk a lot about this, because this card basically rewrites how Paleos win the game. So this card is a rank 6, but once per turn you can put it on top of one of your rank 3 or lower Xyz monsters. Basically, once per turn, you can activate this effect. For the rest of the turn, this card can attack all of your opponent's monsters once each. Then you detach any number of materials from this card. If you do, it gains 1,000 attack for each type of card, monster, spell, or trap that was detached, and your opponents will lose that much attack points as well. So since we are a Paleo deck, hypothetically, we would be making Opabinia. Opabinia's effect activates, detaches a material. Then we would overlay Opabinia into Dragon Gate. Detach your other trap card and the Opabinia itself to buff itself by 2,000 and shrink your opponent's board by 2,000. Basically, this is a Boral Sword that requires virtually zero investment. Like, this card is an actually insane OTK tool. The fact that this can go on any of our Xyz is also just like, I mean, it's just nutty. Like, this card is actually cracked in half. But if you want to really break this card, let me explain my personal favorite use for it that only requires really 2 cards to be in play, which is very easy to do, and an extra Paleo in our graveyard. So on our opponent's turn, if we are able to summon a Paleozoic, and we have access to Magicolloidal Soul, which can be summoned on our opponent's turn, basically, we can overlay the soul in that one Paleozoic into our Opabinia. Opabinia effect will detach Magicolloidal Soul to grab any trap that we want from our deck, or any Paleo trap, rather. This is either going to let us grab Interaction, which is going to help hopefully prevent our opponent from stopping our OTK, or obviously we can just grab a dig tool, whether it be Pikaia, Morella, whatever the case may be. We activate that trap, summon the new Paleozoic from our graveyard. Like I said, you need another one already there, but that's not that hard to achieve. When you summon that new Paleozoic, Magicolloidal Soul will summon itself back. Use Magicolloidal Soul on your Paleo to synchro summon Armory Arm and equip Armory Arm to your Dragon Gate. What you wind up with is a 4100 beater that can attack all of your opponent's monsters once each, shrinks your opponent's monsters by 2,000, and burns them for damage equal to their original attack points once they get run over. If they have even 2 monsters in play, it is basically game over on the spot. Now, obviously, it helps if they're in attack mode, because then you're dealing all of that extra damage, but this card is just bonkers with how much damage you can deal super, super easy, and if you have access to that Magicolloidal Soul or have it in rotation, shockingly easy to not only set up the Dragon Gate, but give it the Armory Arm and practically guarantee that OTK. I mean, heck, even if you have set your opponent's entire board with, like, the Karma Cannon, you're still going to burn your opponent for every single one of their monsters that you're running over. Like, it's just so good. Combining these 2 cards and just how easy they are to make, I love it. It's such a fantastic card for the Paleo archetype. But finishing out our extra deck with our last 2 cards is still the Daigusto Phoenix Cat Shark combo. Just a little way of dealing a bunch more burst damage if we absolutely have to. Basically, Cat Shark obviously detaches, buffs our Daigusto Phoenix to 3,000. Phoenix makes itself be able to attack twice, represents a total of 6,000 damage. It's another thing you can do also where, like, if you have the materials to make both of these, you can make Cat Shark, make Daigusto Phoenix, overlay the Dragon Gate on top of Cat Shark, clear the opponent's board even if they're all in defense mode, and then you're guaranteed 6,000 damage direct, as long as obviously the 3100 attacker is able to swing over everything that was in play. So even though Paleozoics is a control deck, this card opens up the OTK potential in a way that it has never had access to before. I really can't talk enough about Dragon Gate. This card is just broken, and 2 copies, honestly, potentially even 3, should be in every list. My 2 cents. In general, I just think, honestly, Paleozoics, I really do think they're in a pretty good position. If you're a big Paleo fan, I think this is going to be the format to play them in for a little while. Until Paleos get a good turn 1 starter in the modern times, I really don't think Paleos have much of a chance, unfortunately. Ash Blossom, in particular, being basically omnipresent. If they can Ash Blossom your initial starter, it's very hard for Paleos to pick up. But Genesys format, this could be the place. So if you guys like this deck profile, I do hope you'll give it a try. Let's go ahead and share just a couple of very quick games so you guys get a good feel for how this deck operates, and we'll call it there. All right, so this first game is against Blackwings. Blackwings are obviously a little bit outdated by modern standards, but again, in Genesys format, this is an archetype that I think has a pretty decent shot. Illinois getting rid of Black Whirlwind is a really nice early play. Obviously, again, Ice Dragon's Prison, fantastic interaction to help get rid of those troublesome cards early on. That sets us up with our Magic Colloidal Slime. They go to battle phase, and we can immediately XE summon to protect our body. Go ahead and grab that Pikaia out of our deck. Pikaia activation is going to let us grab some new traps so we can set things up and get ready to stall for the next turn. Opponent here is going to go ahead and combo off a little bit. We're going to prevent them from getting that from deck Synchro Summon. Nevertheless, they're going to go ahead and get some of their Synchros off. Some interaction to protect it with Canadia, again setting things down. Setting really is just still such a fantastic form of interaction. Going to Nothung. If I remember correctly, they get a pretty good final board here. Yep, there's the Full Armor Master. Opabinia is still immune. We have our Threatening Roar to protect our board. Goes back to our turn. Anomalous Chorus. Grab another Paleo. Fill the field, but that is exactly what we want. So we're going to get a second body out. At this point, we can already OTK, but we're still going anyway. There's the Dragon Gate, shrink the field, and swing for lethal. Pretty crazy, right? So here we have another game. This one is against Watts. We don't need... Obviously, Watts is not like a tier deck, but I wanted to show this off just because it's a great view of just how easy it is to make the Dragon Gate and the Armory Arm and just show how much damage racks up so fast. So there we go. Go ahead and set the board with Destructive Room. I'm telling you, that one-turn stun, it's so good. Get those Magic Colloidal Beats in there. Another Watt Giraffe. Unfortunately, Watts can't do much through Threatening Roar. We'll set up Needlebug Nest. Get some Paleos in rotation, hopefully. There we go. We've got Dynamiscus. Pikaia is going to help us as well. Make Opabinia right away. Now we have Paleos in the graveyard, which means we are ready to make our perfect combo here. So we'll go ahead and sink into Armory Arm. We make the Dragon Gate, detach, go to 31, Armory Arm, go to 41, and look at that damage stack up. Absolutely freaking crazy. So that is going to about do it, guys. Hopefully, if you are a big Paleo fan like I am, you are super excited to try Genesys format, or just try Genesys format in general. I think this format is going to be a lot of fun for a good long while. I'm sure eventually things are going to start settling and people are going to start figuring out what things are good and what things aren't. But remember that Konami has already demonstrated they are going to be updating the points list. So I wouldn't be too surprised that if the meta does start to settle and there's like a deck that is problematic, more than likely it's probably going to see some hits. So I'm really excited to keep trying the Genesys format as a whole. I've actually got quite a few other Yu-Gi-Oh decks that I've been working on, but Paleos is my true baby here. So this is the deck that I'm going to be playing for at least the beginning of the Genesys format, and we'll kind of see where things go. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure, of course, to like the video, comment down below your Paleo tech choices or things that you have as suggestions. If you like this video, of course, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I do plan on making other Genesys format videos. With that, guys, hope you have a fantastic rest of your night. I'm an avid herpetologist, and I will see you all next time.